So what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you digital watercolor. And this is something that the technology hasn't been available to do this accurately until quite recently. I don't know what just happened. I couldn't tell you what that error was. Sorry. That's your ears. So, if you have this on one layer, so your ink's on this layer, here's what I do. I go to multiply on that layer so that anything underneath it kind of blends in, and then I use the watercolor brush, which I'm just going to find here. Here it is. And you use it exactly like you used watercolor initially, right? So you have a wash. Can you see that on the screen? The harder you press on the stylus, the more paint comes out of that brush. And you've got that nice line, that nice edge to it. And it's wet. It's a wet watercolor brush, right? So what Photoshop is able to do now is recreate what happens when you put wet watercolor on wet watercolor. And it kind of creates the same, using different pressure, it creates that same effect. So it really looks pretty authentic. When it prints, it looks as if it's a real watercolor, if you do a regular digital print. And you can see, adding highlights or shadows is great, but here's the cheat sheet. Usually with watercolor, you have to plan ahead, because you really don't get to do it, you don't get a second take at it. If you screw it up, it's screwed up. With digital, you can kind of cheat a bit and use the eraser tool. You can kind of flip this around or just hit E, and you can do your highlights after the fact instead of having to block them out ahead of time. So you can, it is cheating, but if you're going to use digital, you may as well cheat. So you can kind of get that same effect as when you're working by hand on digital.